Men, hear me on this. Nothing about you is broken. Every pattern you developed was intelligent, but you don't have to stay trapped in the boy's nervous system. You can recondition that. Anything that's been conditioned one way can be conditioned another way.
Welcome to Reforged, a podcast by the Authentic Masculinity Project, a place where we have raw conversation about modern masculinity, capacity, complexity, integration, and authenticity.
Hey guys, and welcome. My name is Scott Austin Martin, and I am a licensed professional counselor. I am a somatic processing trauma therapist. But most importantly, I'm a very proactive relationship, strategic intervention, transformation coach. And today I want to talk about one of what I think is the most important patterns that I've ever taught or discussed that's pretty common out there. I help men reclaim their energy, their presence, their truth by dissolving, the mask or defensive mechanisms that they were conditioned to wear. This pattern that we want to talk about, it's called the needy little boy syndrome. And, what is it, where it comes from, how it's formed, and how men accidentally reinforce it by rejecting their own masculine power. And if you as a man have ever felt clingy, insecure, dysregulated, anxious in relationships, ashamed of wanting sex, or terrified of being too much, this episode is going to explain, exactly why. So let's get into it. So the number one, what is the needy little boy syndrome? The needy little boy syndrome, or we refer to it as NLBS also, it isn't an insult, and it's not a personality weakness. It's not a flaw. It's not immaturity. It's a survival identity. It's a pattern a boy forms when his nervous system is overwhelmed, undersupported, and forced to adapt without safety, attunement, or consistent love. So, we've talked about attachment theory on here before. Go look at that. If you don't know what attachment theory is, that's an entire rabbit hole that you need to probably understand, because it does explain a lot of symptoms of systems of symptoms that explain why we are the way that we are. That has to do with how our caretakers, when we were children, treated us, and what we learned about secure love in those scenarios. So this pattern, it forms when his nervous system is overwhelmed, undersupported, and forced to adapt to safety, attunement, or consistent love. The boy becomes responsible for creating his own sense of safety because no one else is creating it for him. So here are the things that the boy inside most men learn. He learns to chase connection. He learns that he has to earn love, that he has to perform for approval, takes too much responsibility for things, panic when someone pulls away, collapse when alone, feel unworthy and less validated. Let's kind of go back to that takes too much responsibility. I can almost hear some women going, he doesn't take any responsibility. So this same pattern, it goes over and under in a lot of different ways to where it numbs men, or we move into escape patterns. There's a lot of different scenarios where it has the same root pain of why we either shut down or we over engage in ways that are not healthy as well. So this is not weakness. They're frequently brilliant adaptations, but if you don't integrate it as a man, it can become a prison. In the Mask book, I break wounds into 35 specific patterns. Since we wrote that book, we've also identified there's clusters of things of how things kind of happen when it comes to that. In the needy little boy syndrome, what happens is 10 of those wounds collapse into one behavior identity. Let me explain that. So the 10 wounds that are behind the needy little boy syndrome. Inside the Mask framework, needy little boy syndrome is built from 10 individual core wounds. Sometimes there's more or less in all of them across. So these wounds form the emotional architecture of that pattern. Here's what they are: abandonment, inconsistency, rejection, attachment panic, powerlessness, unworthiness, invisible/unseen, shame wound, worthless without performance wound, and over responsibility wound. These are the wounds that a boy learned to navigate. They shaped how he relates to connection, emotion, intimacy, and identity. Men are all about identity. But your nervous system doesn't carry 10 separate wounds. It doesn't say, oh, this is abandonment. Oh, this was shame. It collapses them into two core kind of emotional clusters. These cluster wounds are what really drive like your adult patterns. So, what are the two cluster wounds of the needy little boy syndrome? Well, when they merge, they form two different ones. The first one is cluster wound number one is attachment scarcity. So, this is the belief connection is unstable, love is unpredictable, and I can't survive if someone pulls away. And what does that type of cluster wound create? It creates chasing, anxious pursuit, over contacting, needing reassurance, difficulty with space, and panic around silence. So, cluster wound number two, identity deficiency. So, this is the belief I'm not enough unless I earn it. Who I am isn't lovable. I must perform for acceptance. And it creates people pleasing, fawning, fixing, good boy syndrome, over explaining, or collapsing in conflict. And so you may notice these wounds like there's an over engagement and there's a moving away. So there's both an anxious attachment and there's also a dismissive avoidant that are explained in this particular needy little boy syndrome. So what are some of the ways that men then develop survival mechanisms in coping? Well, one is sex. And that shows up in different ways because sometimes there's a shame wound around sex that offsets that in really conflicting ways where men can't access their masculine energy. So sex for some becomes a drug. And people misunderstand this part because men with NLBS aren't addicted to sex. They're addicted to relief, to the drug. Sex gives the nervous system 5 things the boy never received: attunement, closeness, validation. Well, she must really love me if she's doing this. Warmth and identity. In moments of sexual connection, the body releases, oh my God, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, serotonin. Like it's a pretty heavy mixture. It's a pretty great cocktail. These chemicals temporarily erase abandonment fear, identity shame. It's a big one. Unworthiness, loneliness, and emotional chaos for a few minutes. He feels I'm chosen, I'm wanted, I'm enough, I matter. Of course, the body gets hooked on that. Like who wouldn't, right? So sex becomes the fastest, strongest substitute for childhood attunement. And this is why so many men confuse sexual intensity with intimacy. It medicates the wound. The woman or the sex becomes the pharmacy. It becomes the drug. It's the thing that numbs, that allows us, and we confuse feeling numb or feeling orgasm or feeling bliss in that particular way. We confuse that with intimacy. And it's not intimacy. Intimacy is where you're not objectifying the woman in such a way. And men get confused on this because women want to be desired. They want the passion, right? But there's a difference between actual desire and need. There's a difference. It's subtle, but there is an actual difference because one is wanting something external in order to be okay. Whereas masculinity energy contains its own energy and is okay from its own internal compass, its own internal state of being. So what's some variety of this? Well, what happens when you add sexual shame to the needy little boy syndrome? Well, this is where things get really complicated because many men with NLBS also carry sexual shame, often from religion, trauma, or cultural conditioning. And on top of that, they carry the modern message, masculine energy is toxic. The Me Too movement has, unfortunately, that's the message that has been delivered when the actual message of the Me Too movement was women saying, hey, we want to be safe. That's the message. Will you help us be safe? So if we embrace this masculine energy as toxic, well, now you've created a double bind. The boy needs connection, the man feels unworthy, and the masculine energy required for connection is labeled dangerous. So he now believes my desire is bad, my sexuality is shameful, my masculine presence is harmful. So what does he do? He suppresses the very energy needed to create healthy polarity. And this is why you have women going, where did all the real men go? Like men are so afraid of being labeled as toxic that they've literally turned the dial down on their own authentic masculinity. He becomes the sexless good boy, passive, apologetic, self-censoring, avoiding initiation. Like women, like men don't approach me anymore. He's walking on eggshells. He's collapsing in leadership. He's not leading. He's terrified of offending. So this is why we have so many men that, in more of a definition of toxic masculinity, men that are all spine and no heart, that are jumping into leadership positions because men that want to be authentic men, they need to melt this shit because we need them. Why? Because they also have a heart. That's the reason. So if a man is terrified of offending, he's ashamed of wanting a woman. Well, what woman wants to be Mrs. That? And then he wonders why women don't respond to him. Intimacy feels heavy. He feels invisible. He feels small. He feels unlike himself. Well, because you've killed all the masculine polarity. And he can't heal a masculine wound by rejecting masculinity. So what happens in these scenarios? Well, the feminine takes over when the masculine abdicates. And a lot of women feel like they don't really have a choice, like they have to. When a man collapses his masculine power, the feminine automatically fills the vacuum. And this creates a polarity reversal. It creates a resentment. It creates a confusion. It creates a sexual disconnection because the energy, the synergy of polarity is not there anymore. It creates an emotional burden on the woman, and the man feeling weaker and more ashamed. And the boy inside him gets louder. The boy that needs to be parented. He becomes more needy, not less, because he has no inner father, no inner leader, no internal ground, no inner stance of knowing who he is inside of himself. The boy is forced to run the system. A boy is running the system now. Now, how does a man break this pattern? So healing NLBS isn't about becoming tougher or more stoic. It's not about shaming the boy or suppressing your emotions. It's about integrating the man. And here's how you do that. I'm going to give you a list here. 1, nervous system ownership. You got to learn to regulate your internal state without outsourcing it to women. How do you do that? Oh my God. Mindfulness, somatic process. Go see a therapist that, is trauma informed in some particular way. Any type of proactive training that gets you to go inside and go, hey, what's going on inside of me? Presence conditioning. Develop the ability to sit with tension, desire, emotion, and space without pushing anything away or grabbing, like your ability to be with yourself in a damn room on top of a mat, meditating, just being with what's inside yourself. If you can just do that and get good at that, the rest of the world is toast, man. Somatic processing, soma of the body. There's so many different varieties of that now. Use breath work, somatorespiratory integration, somatic experiencing, emotional freedom technique, EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, TRE, trauma releasing exercises, focusing, the Sedona method. There's so many different methods out there. Go get educated, find something that works for you to metabolize stored charge, triggers, downregulate it. That is defensive energy that needs to be reclaimed. All right, sexual innocence. Reclaim your sexual energy as clean, sacred, and good. It's good to be sexual. It's good. You can create boundaries, but you don't have to be afraid of them. Boundaries are how we love each other. What does it mean? It means you have to actually check in with what her actual needs are, or observe in such a way that you know it before even she knows it sometimes. How do you do that? Pay attention. This is called presence. Showing up. Reclaim healthy masculine energy. So leadership isn't toxic. Direction isn't toxic. Desire isn't toxic. Presence is not toxic. Reclaim those, redefine those, reframe those. Examine each one of those and identify where you're afraid and maybe process something there. right, here's a big one: brotherhood. Men heal fastest in the presence of other men, not through romantic mothering. And this is the big problem where so many men, their only source of nurture is the mothering that they're wanting from their wives. Their wife is not their therapist. Their wife is not their mother. Their wife wants the man to create a container of safety for her, not the other way around. This is why men need other men. They need other men that challenge the shit out of them. They need other men. It's really healthy to have, you'll hear me say this, 5 to 10 men plus that tell you when you're full of shit. Other men that are acting like mountains, that are challenging you to find your own mountainous and rise, right? So that's why we have the Reforged Brotherhood. That's why we have the weekly campfire, to show up and not be a performer, not be somebody that, like, just be still with other men looking at a fire, talking about what is real. There is what is, and there's a story about what is. What is always neutral. The story of what is, it's never neutral. We got to bring men out of this story of fear. All right, so identity reconstruction. This is a big one for men. Men actually don't value value. Men value identity. What's the identity that I can be, that I feel that I want to be? The boy learns safety. The man returns to leadership. And this is integrated masculine. You've got to take these different parts of ourselves. You hear people talk about parts work, shadow work. Take these different parts of us, and we're looking to get all of our rowers rowing into the same direction. Well, often what that means is that you have to have a conversation. You know, if you're the dad and you're parenting the little boy, you got to have a conversation with that little boy about what it means to be a man. Asking him, hey, what's going on? What are you afraid of? And then give him strategy on how to deal with that, how to show up and stay in the room, even when it's difficult. That is a big father-son lesson that has to be modeled and discussed. All right, where to go deeper? If this is resonating with you, there are several different places I want you to go deeper. There's a book called Masks. I'm Scott Austin Martin. That's the author name. It's available on Amazon. This book breaks down 35 core wounds and the exact defense patterns that men keep developing, including the 10 wounds that form NLBS. And it can be a roadmap for understanding who you became and how to dismantle the masks that keep you stuck. Because, you know, way back, shout out to Dr. Barquet in Counseling Theories 101. There was a textbook that had a graph that had a big pie, and it basically said the number one reason people get better in any type of counseling is because they feel understood. Well, my challenge to men is to go one step further than that, and that is understand yourself. And so this is why we have these resources, these tools for how do you name the pattern? Because when you see the pattern, when you shine a flashlight down in there into those foundations of what's creating how you're struggling, and you name it, then you can begin understanding it, and it loses its power. Why? Because you begin creating distinctions of choice, going, wow, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want to do. And just being able to create that distinction gives you an enormous ability to become the master gardener, to prune that part off and begin going, okay, I'm going to channel all of my power and velocity. So when we name the needy little boy syndrome, we gain some power over it. That's why it can be so important to get familiar with how this is showing up, because it gives you very specific understandings of, wow, I'm doing this, and this is why I'm not connecting with my female counterpart, or why I don't have the masculine energy to attract and to lead my life, to create the life that I want, because I don't understand what containment of my own energy means and how to get there. So there's also the book, The Authentic Masculinity Project, where we go over the 4 pillars of how to do the inner work. There's also the book, The Needy Little Boy Syndrome, which is actually written to women, that's validating what most women have experienced, which is this pattern. But it's still helpful that for men to read that book, because again, it names that pattern specifically. If you're serious about undoing this pattern, you need a framework. Those books can help. There's also the Reforged Brotherhood. So we do a free campfire online Tuesdays at 6 p.m. It's an ongoing program. Now, we don't do any deep coaching in the campfire. The campfire is where men can show up to be seen. We have a loneliness epidemic. This is where, and I get it, it's not in person. And you know what?
Thank you for listening to
Go to this
Reforged.
one and then
Remember
create
to
your own
like
in
and
person
subscribe
locally.
for more.
So, but go to this one and help men by showing up and practicing being present, witnessing other men, because it's going to do several different things. It's going to give you a reflection that says, you know what? All this shit is normal. and I'm not the only one going through it. I feel what? Understood. That's a big part of it. The other part is take your time in the spotlight on the call and help other men what actually is, not the story of what is, right? This is not a place for men to show up and be victims. In fact, a big part of our coaching is teaching what is the difference between being an owner and a victim of your life. What is the difference between pleasing and serving? What is the difference between committing to something and just trying? When you're looking for change, what is the difference between thinking your way through something and making a decision with your gut? So your healing isn't about adding anything. It's actually about removing the conditioning, melting everything that's in your way that keeps the boy in charge and restoring the man who's always been underneath. So we're not trying to surgically cut out the little boy. I sometimes jokingly use the terminology kill the boy, but that's not it. It's actually protecting the boy in a new way, to where we're actually asking him to help us with the joy and the creativity, but he's not in charge anymore. Why? Because he's the boy. That's why. We can protect him without allowing him to be in charge. Just because you have empathy for the mental patient doesn't mean you allow them to be in charge of the asylum. So, men, hear me on this. Nothing about you is broken. Every pattern you developed was intelligent, but you don't have to stay trapped in the boy's nervous system. You can recondition that. Anything that's been conditioned one way can be conditioned another way. When you integrate the masculine, your presence, your clarity, your sexual innocence, your leadership, something in you unlocks. You stop chasing, you stop collapsing, you stop living for reassurance. You stop apologizing for your existence. like stop that shit. And you begin living as the man that you were designed to be. You find your own inner stance. You stop looking for validation externally to yourself. That's one of the reasons why we need other men to model that. Not for men to help other men be validated in order for them to find their own strength inside themselves, as in modeling, not as a continuation of needing external validation. It's a subtle line, but we want men to begin understanding this line, because when you can imbue and grab the energy of a mountain range of men, but then you have to embody it. That's what this is about. Embody. Big word. Write it down. Make sure that you see it everywhere. Embody who you came here to be, who your soul came here to be, and melt everything that is not that. Okay, so if this episode helped you, share it. Leave a review, please. The algorithm works better for us when you like, subscribe, all that. We can get this information out to more men and step into the work. Your entire life depends on it. This is the Reforged Podcast. I'll see you the next time. Take care, guys.